Hello and welcome to Leo season. I hope that you're all staying shaded and hydrated during this infernal heat. In this month's episode, we welcome Bradley Sneddon and Andreas Erneus, ongoing translators of the Summa Sacre Magice, the Summa of Sacred Magic, a text collated in the 14th century by the first of the author magicians, the enigmatic Berengarius Ganellus. Today, Bradley, Andy, and I talk about the importance of this text and what we know about its author and the surviving manuscripts, as well as the dizzying complexity of its contents. We consider the sources Ganell drew from and the influences this material had on history. This version of the translation of the Summa contains a fragment of another text titled Magisterium, which is tentatively attributed to Ganell, and offers us a further glimpse into the philosophy of thought, religion, and magic at the heart of medieval magic. We talk about magical linguistics, practical theology, voces magicae, demonic hierarchies, the nature of the winds, cosmological structures, and much, much more. I am your host, Matt Hadfield, and I am very happy to welcome Bradley and Andy to the Hadean Press podcast. Bradley and Andy, welcome to the podcast. It's really awesome to have you both with us to discuss this most important text, the Summa Sacre Magice.
Thank you, Matt, for inviting us. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thanks, Matt. Yes, it is a pleasure.
I feel like this episode is probably going to be a long one, so let's get right into the meat of things. I have seen both of you contributing significantly to several online research groups on Facebook and other social media over the years. How did you two both come to become a team, essentially, and how did you discover the Summa Sacre Magice?
For me, it started when I left Melbourne in late 2021. I rejoined Facebook, started connecting with the Solomonic community, and at the time I translated Liber Consecrationem from Richard Kuykefer's edition of the Munich Handbook. One of the things that struck me was in country Victoria, you're not likely to find a priest willing or even able to celebrate the Mass of the Holy Ghost for the consecration of magical books and instruments. So I started looking into the possibility of ordination. Then talking with Adelaide Nichols on Messenger, I heard about the Liber Trium Animarum, whereby you can consecrate your own paraphernalia without a priest, but you're still staying within the Solomonic tradition. So when it became available, I bought a copy. And by then I'd been hearing about a text called Summa Sacre Magice, heard about it on some podcasts. And I bought Brian Johnson's Naming the Heavens, and when I realized there wasn't the Latin transcription of the prayers, I decided to look into the manuscript myself and see if I could actually read medieval Latin manuscripts. And fortunately, the Castle manuscript is reasonably easy, and with a copy of Capelli, which Mihai Vatajaru, I hope I pronounced that correctly, sorry if I didn't, but which Mihai advised me to get, transcription became possible. So I started doing transcriptions of the planetary orations and orations to the planetary spirits. I think I started in December 2022, eventually transcribed all 14, and by that time I'd been communicating with Andy a fair bit. He was helping me with difficult passages that I found hard to translate, or words that I could not decipher, things that did not appear to be in Ganelli, and we eventually, Andy suggested that if I were to transcribe the testimony of conjuration of the first season, The other testimonial conjurations would be fairly easy because they're so much shorter. And he said that he'd already done the testimonial oration of the third season, and that would give us the substance of the entire work. And we could then go back and translate or transcribe and translate Treatise 1, and we'd have Book 1 ready to go, uh, and we'd have momentum. So I agreed, and uh, here we are. A few years later, we've now published Book 1 and Book 2. For Book 2, the transcription is done. The translation is almost done. So yeah, we hope to be ready to publish that in a few months.
I'll just add my 2 cents from another side. Uh, uh, we have been talking about the SSM for a long time in the magical community, and everyone was hoping that Damaris Hare would publish her own translation. As you know, she was the most renowned expert on Ganell, and she wrote her PhD thesis on the SSM. So when around 7 years ago, I got the Russian translation of the first 2 books of Summa, I immediately started to discussing them with a few friends on Facebook. In the chat, Dr. Dan Schneider suggested when we start working together on a new English translation of the SSM. And after his death, we continued to study different chapters, but no one dared to undertake a step-by-step translation. And maybe only Joseph Peterson then published his translation of the, I think, most important part of the SSM. It's the prayers from the book of the Three Souls. But I think he just finally got tired of hearing us asking him for translation. So finally he translated it. And while I was working on some chapters, translating for myself from first book of SSM, I saw that Bradley was posting his transcription of prayers, 7 prayers of the planets. This was, as he told, after Brian had already published his book on planetary prayers. Yeah. And I suggested him that he joined the SSM chat, and that's how we started working together there.
Yeah, it's a wonderful story of collaboration. Yeah, it's really cool, and it happened over quite a bit period of time too, right? How long ago was this now?
Yeah, 2022.
2022, right? Yeah,
Yeah,
right
Yes.
after Brian published his book. I see. Yeah.
that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is something that's been brewing online for a long time. I've not seen everything, but I've seen parts of the translation effort occurring in these groups, and yeah, it's just fascinating to watch you guys do this work. Wonderful stuff. Yeah, but thank you for sharing that. Before we look at the actual content of the Summa, can we first maybe we spend a little bit of time talking about its enigmatic author? We could say that he is the first author magician. We call him today Ganellus or Ganell. But who was this man, and what do we know about him from history?
Okay. I've got a little bit of stuff prepared. Unlike many medieval magical authors who concealed themselves behind ancient authorities, Berengar Ganell presents himself under his own name, offers no autobiography and no dedication, nothing that could be called a personal memoir, but scattered remarks throughout the Summa Sacre Magice allow us to reconstruct a little bit of his life. And Damaris Asher Gaia, or Hea, I'm not sure how to
Yeah.
pronounce that. Gaia. Apologies to her if she's watching and I'm getting her name wrong. Um, she gives some information in the Routledge History of Medieval Magic, namely that he may have completed the Summa by 10th of July 1346. Uh, that's a date apparently mentioned during a ritual concerning the Angels of the Day. By this time, he was already describing himself as a Magister Philosophiae. He decries the poor education received by the younger generation.
As we
So,
always do.
as we always do, which suggests he'd obviously regarded himself as belonging to an older generation. And apparently, he lived in Perpignan, which at the time had recently come under the crown of Aragon. At one point, he compares the magician's hooded cloak with the dress worn by licentiates in Paris. That at least suggests a possibility that he studied philosophy and theology at the University of Paris. And we have a little bit of supplementary information from an inquisitorial trial at Mende in 1347. A geezer named Stephanus Papini, a defrocked friar, apparently was or recounted travelling through Spain in search of magical books and being directed to Perpignan to see Ganellus. Apparently, Ganellus showed him his own copy of Liber Juratus, hosted him for several months, and assisted him in his studies. So, from that, we can get the impression Ganell was recognised in his own lifetime as a practitioner and teacher of learned magic. And we know that his reputation continued after he died, because Tritemius knew of him and of the Summa and condemns both him and the Summa in the Antipulus Maleficiorum.
Mhm.
The Castle manuscript probably passed through Tritemius's hands. In fact, it might even be known for a fact that it was part of the Tritemius's library. It also appears to have passed through the hands of John Dee. And yeah, that's pretty much the glimpse we have of who Ganell was.
So quite enigmatic. There's not much to really find on this character.
That's right. And as far as I know, more might come to light in the future, of course. Uh, Weird stuff turns up in archives.
Andy, do you have anything to add to that?
Oh, it's everything we know about Ganellus, we knew from research of Damaris here. So Bradley told about all everything we know about him.
Right, so there's just nothing more, right? Well, it's fascinating to learn even then. So yes, we know we know there was a court case, and we know that he may have studied in Paris, which is really interesting. And can you give our audience who might not be familiar a brief description of what the Summa Sacre Magice actually contains?
If we look at the table of contents, we will see a vast area of magical practices in it. Invocations, conjurations, how to call spirits depending on seasons. But some might get the impression that this is just another large grammar. But however, this is not quite the case. The Summa is neither a summary or a compendium. It is a distinctive literary genre from the Middle Ages. And we know many religious and legal summas. The most known of course, Aquinas' Summa Theologiae. It is usually the author's systematic exposition of a subject. And Ganell sets out his own vision of magic for us. And that magic, which we might call Solomonic, in the work of Ganell, actually he provides us with both theory and practice. Ganell does not immediately overwhelm us with, so to speak, with a course of magical theology, but he weaves theoretical parts into practical chapters. And also he quotes works of Solomon, Tos Graecus, Honorius, and in other words, from the very first book, we are gradually immersed into the practice and theory of magical system, namely Solomonic magic. So in the Summa, we can find chapters on spirits of hell, their seats or thrones, and on methods of conjuring different classes of spirits. A chapter on Almadel, on names of God. It provides many different prayers for consecration of objects and for preparation for rites. It describes a huge amount of magical instruments which were maybe subsequently lost or which were modified in other grimoires. In other words, the Summa is a unique text for both practitioners and researchers of magic.
So, is it fair to say that this Summa is itself a patchwork of earlier grimoiric materials?
Yes, definitely.
Is there anything that Ganell brings to it that's unique?
Possibly the well, Honorius gives a fair bit of theology in his work, but Ganellus does speak of magic as being applied theology. And I think one of the unique things, uh, things that I haven't seen in any other grimoire, is the conjuration of the first intelligence. And it seems to be Neoplatonic or something derived from reading Avicenna. And Avicenna, like we obviously cannot say conclusively that Ganell read Avicenna, but what we can say is that for a master of philosophy in that time, Avicenna was part of the, he was like
Curriculum.
he was the
Yeah.
curriculum, he was
Yeah.
the nitrogen in the intellectual atmosphere people were breathing, while Aquinas was the oxygen, or I don't know,
Mm.
maybe a silly analogy, but yeah, he was a big part of it.
Mm.
There's also the way he speaks about going from the universal to the particular and back to the universal in the sequence of conjurations. And that seems to be based in philosophy and the sort of approach to theology, maybe.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
But for people who maybe have never heard of the Summa, and that to up until this point, I think people who have been plugged in, who have been reading and studying about this subject, will know why the Summa is so important, or like having a complete version of the Summa is so important to us today. But could you just give us a short description of why it's so important? Why is it so vital to our current understanding of what today, I guess, we would call the grimoiric tradition?
Well, for me, when I was first transcribing the testimonial conjuration of the first season, the thing that really blew me away about it was the fact that planets change their names according to the sign that they are transiting, that the signs change their names according to the seasons, and that even the parts of the earth change their names according to the season. It was weird and thrilling. It was so obviously more detailed than the seasonal changes in the Heptameron. And to me, it spoke of a kind of, I don't know, it just seems that when practicing this magic, one is not just sort of trying to boss around spirits, but one is being an active participant in the dynamism of the universe, a living universe. And plus the fact that it's was so much earlier than any other grimoire that I'd really come across before. And when I come across the Abrak, Supra Abrak Ruens, I'm I'm garbling that totally at the moment. But yeah, that well-known bit that we find in the Goetia, um, when you're establishing a control over the spirit, and which we also find in the Heptameron. When I read that in the actual, digitized copy of the manuscript on my computer, I was doing a psychiatric nursing night shift. Clients were all in bed asleep. Um, and I was there in this on this laptop on the staff room table, and my jaw dropped, and I thought, wow. Um, well, I won't repeat the words I actually said, but
So to make that clear, it's like we're talking about a transmission of specific conjurations, like specific name, like proper nouns that have been transmitted through history over hundreds of years into essentially into the modern day usage of the like modern grimoires like the Ars Goetia from this document. So it's like this is I don't want to say this is ground zero, because as we established earlier from my prior question, that Ganell was himself drawing from other materials that existed in his day, and he was creating essentially a summa, or a patchwork of these ideas together into a unified, as you said, clockwork whole. But what we're seeing is that these words and names and conjurations survive through history, and this is sort of could we say this is the earliest example that we have of these names in use?
I think we could. Yes, so far, obviously, yeah, hopefully, a copy of Pseudo Solomon's Magia will turn up, or something by Tos Grekus. Stranger things have happened.
Or
But
an original version of Liber Iuratus.
or exactly, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. We get into this murky territory though, because prior to the 14th century, so we know that there are grimoires in 13th century, 12th century, maybe even 11th century, but there are no extant copies of these manuscripts that we have access to.
No.
So this is why I think that the Summa is itself such an important document. It's incredible to think that we have like it's incredible to think that we are this close to a complete translation of it. So having access to everything again, I think it's going to change the landscape. So I'm really, really excited about it. So we've established a little bit about the author, Ganell, and why the document is so important. But what is the actual history of the manuscript of the Summa, and how do we find it surviving into the modern day?
It seems to have been hidden for quite a long time, as far as I know. Uh, I think, Andy, you were saying that it appeared first in 1960, maybe the
Yes,
60s,
yes. It was discovered. Castle manuscript was discovered in 1960s.
and then was not. Nobody really did anything with it for quite a while.
Nobody digged into it, and I think that nobody just understood what it is until Damaris here and some other specialists in medieval magic started to resort this manuscript. And besides the main castle manuscript, we have also German translation in Berlin library. It is of the late 16th century. And also we have a manuscript from Halle Library. It is a large collection of texts like Liber Razielis, Liber Teizolius, Almadel, Shemam Farash. And among these texts, there are separate sections on SSM. So the entire text dates of Halle manuscript dates from 15th century. That's everything we know about the manuscripts.
Right, right. Well, we also know, I think we touched on it briefly as well, that it did fall into the hands of Dr. John Dee.
Yes, about the history of of Halle manuscript, of Kassel
The
manuscript. The Kassel manuscript, as we know, let me find. I have my notes about it somewhere in different place.
My impression was that somehow Dee had actually owned it when he lived at Mortlake, but apparently that's not the case. He came across it in Europe and it travelled around Europe with him for a while. Is that not true?
Okay, we know that after Ganell wrote this manuscript, then it was transmitted to somewhere else, and then it probably was in the hands of Johannes Trithemius. We know also that Trithemius gave this manuscript for copying. So there was it must be another copy of this manuscript somewhere. It was in 1507, and we know the name of the guy who was in charge for copying. His name was Wirdung. So after that, we found this manuscript in the hands of John Dee, and then in the end of 16th century, it was passed to Landgrave Wilhelm, and so it was set in Castle Library after that. That's what we know about Castle manuscripts. And after that, we found it only in 20th century in library. And after that, people started to research it.
I think it's really wonderful what you said before about how we'd found it, but nobody understood what it even was. Nobody even understood how to even approach it. So we've come so far in our understanding of the subject of what magic actually is since then. Even in the 1960s, there was still a lot going on, magically speaking, especially in the UK and America. But the idea that we found this document and it sat around for decades and decades now waiting for this moment, I think is really important. It's really impressive. It's really important to us. And it's a vital key in understanding our tradition, or the tradition of working magic in a European context. So it's and we can also say that even though it's been hidden from us, even though it's been ignored for decades and decades, we know it's still like sort of had this massive influence on us via John Dee's work with the Enochian angels, etc. And then later on as well with in the 1970s with Jake Stratton-Kent and Kath Thompson, Jim Lees, we've got like the EQ, which is like a post-thelemic system of magic, which is equally as influenced by this. So we see John Dee influencing Crowley, influencing Jim Lees into the modern day. So even though, like I said, even though it's been hidden, it has been influencing us regardless, and new forms of magic have been budding from it, even though we don't understand, even though we had no idea about this as a source. So it's incredibly fascinating, absolutely amazing stuff. But for the next question, you both chose to include a prelude to book one in your translation, a text that we aren't entirely sure was authored by Ganell, but which we have some significant evidence plays an important role in the story of the Summa. What is this text, and what do we learn from it?
We're talking about Magisterium. Yes. Actually, we know very little about other works of Ganell, and Damaris Herr carried out research into a 15th century text that was written in Italy, and its name Magisterium was written with error, like Magosterium, and actually this is a part of a copy of a text. And the full name is Magisterium of Eumatical Art. Not the original of 14th century text, but it is all we have now. And also we found, she find that the style of this text is very similar to Ganell's work in many respects. And we can find there his own ideas also. And most importantly, that it contains almost the same quotations from the works of Solomon and Tos Graecus as in Summa. And most likely this text was written after the Summa. And it is like, this part is like an introduction to an extensive treatise on magic, maybe of the same amount of pages like Summa. We don't know. And the magisterium addresses questions concerning the dignity of magician, the role of human play in the celestial hierarchy, and why we have the power to command spirits. Even if this text is not a text of Ganell, it is very important because it exposes the very same principles of magic as we find in Summa. And if it was not written by Ganell, then we have yet another reference to the works of Magister Solomon, or Master Solomon.
Yes, so this is something really interesting we should bring up. When Ganell talks about Solomon, he is not specifically talking about the King Solomon that we may be familiar with.
It's a difficult question because for a long time I held the view that the Solomon whom Ganell referred to was a real historical person who knew several languages and was familiar with the Jewish Arabic magic. And probably he may have lived in Byzantine Empire. But it is interesting that Ganell himself didn't see it that way, because sometimes he refers to Solomon by the magical name, testimonial name of King Solomon, like we find it in testimonial conjuration. And in the fourth book of the Summa, he explicitly speaks of him as a biblical person. But anyways, we understand that we are dealing with the work of a certain magician, which are signed with the name of Solomon, or if this was originally a pseudo epigraph, we don't know. Maybe it was indeed his real name, Solomon, or magical name. We don't know now. And also for Tos Graecus, some grimoires text says that Tos Graecus was one of Solomon's 4 students, direct students. So we can take these 2 parts of puzzle and connect them and understand that most probably the real Solomon was magician who lived maybe 200 years or 300 years before Ganell, and his student was Tos, who was Graecus maybe, and after that this tradition was passed to Honorius. So I think this is the story we can understand from all these puzzles.
I think it's quite fascinating, specifically because what we can suggest, maybe not state, but we can suggest that perhaps what we call the Solomonic tradition today could essentially be stemming from this point with Ganell, sort of a synthesis whereby there was an original person, a potential original human named Solomon, who was a magician, who had students like Tos Graecus, who was then syncretized with the concept of the mythical biblical King Solomon, and that idea is then propagated into modernity. So I think this is, I mean, it's not a conclusive thing to state, but I mean, we are talking about the Summa Sacre Magice, which is sort of bedrock Solomonic material as far as we know, right? Okay, so moving on to the next question. A subject close to my heart is astrological sorcery, and we have kind of touched on this a little. Some of your answers have mentioned the idea of like the signs and the planets in permutation with one another. But yes, we find that the Summa is full of this form of magic, with various names for the planets, the signs, and can you elaborate for us a little further on the importance of astronomy, astrology in the form of magic which is described by Ganell in the Summa?
I don't have a lot. I don't think I've got a lot that I can really say about the astrological magic side, except maybe that, well, my concept of it is that with the knowing the names of the planets in particular signs and signs in seasons, it might be that being able to address the relevant spirits of the heavens according to where they are at the particular time and therefore according to what their function is, and that knowing the names of the planetary spirits who harmonize influences, it could be that we can, this system of magic is giving us a way whereby we can consecrate talismans and pentacles and things without having to wait for a particularly spectacular astrological election. It's sort of like, as astrology creates cosmic weather, but we get to have an umbrella or um, sort of hack the system or something by knowing the names.
Yeah, I
Yes,
love that.
From one side, Ganell told us about astrology as the basics, but from another side, he told just name the spirit who is governing heavens in this season and of the domination of this planet and so on.
Like the idea that we can at any point we have spirits that we can contact and work with, so we constantly have this ingress point into working any form of magic because somebody's on the clock, as it were, right now, that we can make. Once we enter our circle, we can then contact them through them we can produce magic. So it's like constantly having a phone book ready and knowing exactly who to call.
Not only do we have the phone book, we've got the roster. So we know which angels are rostered on duty at a particular time. So yeah, it's, as you say, it's like having the phone book and the roster of a bureaucracy. When you need to get in touch with a geezer, um, you know who's on, and you can address him by name when he picks up the phone.
And it's not just specifically astrology as well. So we understand that there are the planets and the signs in permutation, but we also have I think you've already mentioned, we have the names of the seasons and the names of I think it's like material that we might find in other grimoires. Like we've got like the head of the sign, the name of the sun, the name of the moon, the name of the earth. I think is it Liber Raziel? I think we have a lot of material which is very similar in function to that. And one point that I really enjoy is just that it is essentially it's a language based magical system which is founded on a knowledge of an understanding of proper nouns, or just knowing the names of what forces are waxing into power in the moment in which you're doing your work. So having access to these names, it's not that we, as you mentioned earlier quite perfectly, that we don't have to wait around for a specific election. We can just get going. We can get started immediately, and then we can progress from any point. But it's not just those names as well. It's such a baroque system that goes on and on and on. And there's so many of these names, and we also have like, it's wonderful, yeah. But yeah, I think a question that I kind of we brought up before we started the chat in a prior conversation, but it's just something I kind of wanted to hear your opinion of. But how do you think these names were formed? Is there a is there some kind of uh theory behind them? Perhaps some kind of gematria or something? What do you think? What is it behind the names? What generates them in the system?
On that time, for now, we don't know because it is possible that all these names were formed from different languages. Maybe they were formed from different languages and including some kind of ancient gematria. I think that to answer this question, we need to make more research, comparing names, languages, and go deep in this.
Bradley, do you have any ideas?
Well, yeah. um, I'm not sure it's a very good idea or very plausible, but we have those tables in the three books of occult philosophy by Agrippa. Um, and I'm pretty sure that the idea is that you like if you have the name of a spirit for a particular day or planet, you can then sort of Agrippa speaks of entering the tablet tables. You can enter it um, in the same I don't know the same rows perhaps um, into the next column which belongs to Mars or Monday or whatever if you're starting Sunday, and the letters mutate accordingly. Um, so I have wondered if there was some system like that because we see permutations. You were pointing out the names of Mercury, I think.
Yeah,
How does
Mercury and Taurus.
yeah, the way the name they just seem to permutate, but then one of the names of Mars becomes simply Scas, which has seems to have no relation with any of the other names if the other names were generated using this tabular method. Yeah, so look, personally, I'd like to believe that people just actually conjured the spirits and said, oh, by the way, what's your name when your planet moves into Taurus? And oh, it's this. Oh, thank you. And when you get to you know sign X, what is it? Scas. Oh, oh,
Oh,
okay.
thanks.
So yeah, thanks for that. So yeah, just wrote it all down. Um, but yeah, some other method is probably more likely.
I'm sure that there's some kind of structure there, but like you said, there's a couple of the names which are like completely random, and I think like one of the names of Mars is just Mars, right? Um, so I think perhaps some kind of noise has been introduced into the signal at some point in its transmission. Like we've said, Ganell was drawing from sources instead of like creating this wholesale uniquely by himself. So there's always that chance for errors to slip in at some point. But it's still really fascinating, and I would, although I would love, like you said, that these names are sort of vessels that have been transmitted to the sorcerer when and they were received in that sense. But there's just so many branches of sorcery that end up resembling like encryption, like systems of encryption. So I kind of think that these guys were smart. They were transmitting information in all these really interesting ways, and I think there might be something like that at play. But yeah, more evidence needed. Still an
Yeah.
interesting question.
An idea that I have had is that maybe the a combination of the table form and something else was done, but the names might have originally been somewhat arbitrary, and perhaps somebody compiled these names, tables of names, etc., and then did a huge consecration ritual on the maybe based on the notion that uh, these totally are not the names of angels at these particular times. But if we pray hard enough to God and invoke angels and have a bishop doing or a bunch of priests doing the Mass of the Holy Ghost and, really make a big effort, then the book will be consecrated, and the names will be sort of uploaded to the cosmos, or it's like all of the angels or God will agree that, okay, um, I'm now going to tell the angels that they have to respond to these names at
Hmm.
these particular times.
Hmm.
So yeah, that's
Sort of
that's
the
that's a notion I've had.
yeah,
Um,
like Adam in the garden naming all the animals and naming everything in creation. The sorcerer steps into the circle and assumes the same role. The sound of the name may be arbitrary, but as I said, it's a vessel which we pour meaning into, and it responds to that exact permutation of astrological forces that are at play in the moment. Yeah, it's a really fascinating way, and I think this is why, as we've said several times now, this is such an important aspect of this form of magic, linguistic magic, right? That makes it so useful to us in the modern day, and I think yeah, there's just so much we can sink our teeth into. I'm not sure if I've got this written as a question for you guys actually, but I think it would be cool to learn a little bit about the four main languages that Ganell mentions. Andy, what would you say about this?
Uh, it all starts with how Ganell defines the magic. He says that this is the science of words. In Latin, magica est scientia verborum. So he then goes to raise the question, in which language is it the best to recite magical incantations? And this is where the idea for sex comes in. Um, in other words, four languages associated with the four religious laws, the four directions, and so on. In fact, we are dealing with languages of four religions, like Hebrew for Jewish faith, and Latin for Christianity, Greek for paganism, and Arabic, of course, for Islam. And sometimes he calls it Hadean language.
Mm-hmm.
At one point, Ganell says that for us, of course, Hebrew will be more powerful language to common spirits, but um, the text is also very effective in Latin. And to a great extent, it all depends on the culture in which a person was raised. So, magician. So, this is the question of culture and four sacred languages.
And the manner in which we engage with the magic is how do I say, the manner in which we do this, we physically move our bodies about the
yeah,
circle in the direction in which our cultural script is written.
yeah, it's wonderful. The idea that, like, well, it's easy to get the impression through modern occultism that anti-clockwise is evil and clockwise is good. Yeah, but not the case with Ganell. Simply, yeah, you go anti-clockwise if your script is written right to left. You go clockwise if it's left to right. Nice and simple. No inherent evil in this direction or that direction.
Mm.
Um,
But with language at the center of this, right?
yeah,
This why when I say that it's a linguistic form of magic that I'm so really interested in. I find it fascinating. Really, really fascinating. But yeah, thank you.
mm.
So one of the most fascinating aspects of Ganell's work is in how he was bold enough to sign his work with his own name and declare openly that magic, something that the church desperately wanted to crush, was not to be considered something evil or taboo, but a genuine Christian practice which should be embraced as the mystery school of the faith. In your book, you write, unlike the vast majority of magical texts of its time attributed to figures of unquestionable authority from the past, Aristotle, Hermes, Trismegistus, Albertus Magnus, Roger Bacon, or the legendary Solomon, the Summa is signed with the author's real name. By signing his work with his own name, Ganell thereby designates the Summa not as secret knowledge transmitted under the guise of ancient authorities, nor as the result of dubious magical practices that conflict with church doctrine, but as the result of deliberate intellectual work aimed at reconciling magical knowledge with theological and philosophical tradition. He affirms sacred magic as a discipline subordinate to God and integrated into the Christian cosmic order, thus permitting authorship, argumentation, and intellectual responsibility, which I think this is so cool. Obviously, his efforts here were futile because we know from history how that worked out. But that doesn't mean that this story is over, I think. And now that his work has been revitalized and translated into English, made available to us once more, I think this question gets reignited. It gets opened up for us once more. And there is this open-handed plurality in Ganell's work, as well as we just mentioned, as he considers himself to be a Christian, but he opens up this magic to all four, as he puts it, all four of the major faiths that we mentioned prior. But I want to ask you, how do you personally see this being important to our current day? What can we learn from Ganell's approach, and why do you think that the church was so aggressive against this form of practice? Why did it try to crush magic as a mystery system, while other faiths managed to produce their own? For instance, we have the Jewish Merkava, and the tradition of Kabbalah, and in Islam we have the Sufis.
It could be that there was that the church considered the monastic contemplation to be sufficient mysticism, but you know, don't really know enough to be sure about that. Um, Interestingly, though, with Islam having Sufism, that's not a thing that's universally liked or approved of within Islam. And sort of on psychiatric night shifts on an acute ward, when I was still in Melbourne, I got to know an Afghan security guard, and I said something about Sufism, and he looked horrified and said that back in Afghanistan, if he actually met a Sufi, he would be obligated to kill him for practicing sorcery. Yeah.
So even in the traditions as they exist today, there's still a lot of contention. Let's put it that way.
Uh, yeah, there is. Um, I would imagine that the church objected to magic and kept on suppressing it, maybe because it gives people agency. You know, even if you can't alter physical reality by chanting conjurations, it could make you into a cheeky bastard who thinks for himself and won't be told what to think. Uh, you know, that in itself might be threatening to the church's authority. And the other thing is when you've got um, a heavyweight like Thomas Aquinas condemning magic, Ganell presents wonderful arguments for embracing it and seeing it as practical theology, but he's sort of a bit of an upstart and a young whippersnapper, and who is he to challenge Aquinas? That
Mm.
I reckon that could have been an typical inquisitor's attitude. Yeah, it's just too challenging. There's too much weight, huge ponderous weight to the condemnation of magic. I don't know if you're an inquisitor and you're finding this stuff, you know, so you decide not to condemn the magician, you decide to um, make a copy of the book and try it out. How are you going to explain that to your hierarchy and convince them to get on board? And by the way, let's go and tell the Pope this stuff is really good, and um, you know, get him to experiment with it. It'll be fantastic.
It's probably not a good idea to do
He'll see
that.
reason, you know.
Regardless, though, as far as we understand anyway, Ganell was not executed for heresy despite putting his name on this manuscript.
No, he wasn't.
So he got away with this essentially in an environment that was otherwise incredibly antagonistic against magic.
We don't know exactly if this manuscript, this Summa, was well known during his lifetime, but we know that his name was in the protocols of Inquisition by another case, but anyway, it was. And what is significantly that, as we told earlier, that Ganell wrote the work in the genre of Summa as a scholastic book, not magical book. He reveals the sacred magic on his drawing on his expertise as magister of philosophy, master of philosophy, and he doesn't wish to hide this knowledge, but like others under the name of mythical person like any others. But on the contrary, he wished to reveal the sacred magic to the people. And yes, of course, Church has always forbidden magic, but not mysticism. And magic was considered dangerous because of involving demons, dark spirits. But in reality, this has more to do with the separation of power, authority of the church, and competition could not be tolerated in any time, you know. But anyway, Ganell's work was not the grimoire style like others. It was not published in the time we didn't publish, but it was written like a theological summa, like scholastic work. So maybe this was the side which was not drawn attention of church at that time.
Authorities. Yeah, so it sort of
Yes.
snuck by as a work of learned theology as opposed to a grimoire of magic. Yeah, yeah. It's just interesting how characters like Cecco Diascoli only a few decades earlier were burned alive at the stake for doing their exposition on the spheres of the cosmos and discussing things like astrological negromancy. And meanwhile, a few decades later, we get Ganell, who writes his own name on this massive tome of magic, which includes all of these same sort of spirits, and in incredible detail as well, no less. Yeah, it's interesting how history plays out in that way.
I haven't had the chance to read about or to read Checo
Mm.
yet. I'll certainly be buying a copy when it's available. And there's a Lynn Thorndike Sphere of
Mhm.
Sacrobosco and its commentators, which I'm going to be buying.
Mhm.
But I did come across a reference. I think I was asking ChatGPT about Cecco d'Ascoli, and I think GPT said that one of the things that may have pissed off the Inquisition was that he put the demon Floron
Above the
as
moon.
above the moon,
Yeah.
yeah, the North Star.
Mhm.
And well, I guess that's heresy according to the
Mhm.
church because all the demons belong in the sublunary
Yep.
sphere.
We make a note of that in the book.
Yeah.
Yeah, probably one of the main reasons that he got in trouble for the first time round is putting demons above the sphere of the moon. Uh,
Mm.
Heresy.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah,
was it you? Maybe you said that
yeah,
last time we spoke. Okay, it
yeah,
wasn't ChatGPT then.
yeah. Um, yeah, you're right. He was he got in a lot of trouble for that. But like I said, Checo was he was punished for his crime, but he wasn't burned at the stake initially. It was only after he went over to Florence and started working for the Duke of Florence there, within his court, that he just continued teaching astrology and continued teaching astrological negromancy and making astrological predictions that really upset people. And as a result of that, like the bishop at the time got really pissed off with him, and I think the duke and the bishop got together and then informed the Inquisition that Checo was still up to no good, and that went immediately to him being burned alive at the stake. We see how it's kind of rare for that to for such an event like that to happen quickly. They usually it's a second offense. It's not like that they just went straight to burn him. So it's interesting to me at least that even though Checo spent so much time trying to hide his sources and trying to hide where he was getting this information from, it's more the fact that he was just being like aggressively loud about it. I think people just didn't like that. Um, Whereas, yeah, then we say, a few decades later, we get Ganell signing his name on the Summa. But like you said, Andy, it might not have been a well-known document. It might have just been that he wrote it and would have shared it with his closest friends or his closest peers.
Maybe we don't know, but then after Tritemius got the copy of Summa, he wrote very bad things about Ganell as, as a as a person who is against the church and so on. I don't remember the full text, but that was the position which Abbot of church publicly addressed to other church writers
Mhm.
and readers.
But Trithemius had one of the largest libraries of occult and forbidden texts in Europe at the time. So, I mean, him condemning Ganell and saying, "Oh, this is a terrible author and a terrible book," kind of makes sense because he also doesn't want to get burned alive, right? So, why do you have this great big library full of forbidden text? Oh, it's for research, right? So I've had David Rankin on the show, and he has made a good point of underscoring the role of the 40 winds in the practice of conjuration. And these 40 winds we find just detailed in the Summa Sacre Magice. So we find that Ganell, as he incorporates this into one of the initial conjurations in book one of the Summa. We know that these spirits can be considered equal to other spiritual creatures such as angels or demons, as exemplified by the content of Brian Johnson's as yet unpublished translation of Liber Thesolius, where their exact taxonomy is wonderfully ambiguous. What is your understanding of these winds, these 40 names, and their importance to the practice of conjuration?
I think that we still need to discuss this in academic circles. So we cannot say definitely what these entities are for now. But the one thing we know is that Ganell speaks of two types of winds. The first are natural winds, and the second are unnatural. And these unnatural winds control the movement of demons. So in magic, these winds are of particular interest, namely the unnatural winds. And in various places, Ganell puts forward the following formula. God is above all, above everything. The angels are above stars, but the man is above the demons and winds. So see, he separates the winds and demons. It's a different kind of spiritual entities. And he says that the winds are above the demons. So if we call upon the winds, we can either speed up or force the arrival of spirits, particular demons. And by the way, Honorius also mentioned these winds in Liber Iuratus, but he doesn't give them attention they deserved.
There's something in Honorius, Joseph Peterson's Honorius. There's something about raising up the winds 9 times, but I thought I'd come across something, I can't find it at the moment, but suggesting that the winds are, at least according to Honorius, if I'm presuming that I'm remembering correctly, that the winds are literally a more powerful type of demon.
Yeah, there's still some ambiguity in the sources, which I think is really interesting as to what they actually are. And like I mentioned in Brian Johnson's unpublished work on Liber Thesolius right now, is that they're all mentioned, but the taxonomy is sort of up in the air a bit. And I think it's because essentially this is prior to the summer, of course, but there's been no one individual author who'd put them all together and attempted to create any kind of like coherency from a vast amount of sources. So I think we're dealing with different potential taxonomies from a variety of different sources, all competing in this period of history. But yeah, as I was saying before, the idea that the 40 winds are they're just a really fascinating aspect of the process of conjuration. I don't want to say that they have been lost, but they have been streamlined essentially out of the process in the modern context.
Yes.
But yeah, and bringing them back in, I think adds a lot of value and also opens up a lot more questions for us to consider in the way that we approach our conjuration.
In book 2, and I'm sure we'll find references to this in Dr. Skinner's edition, but also in ours, obviously, concerning the 6 thrones of spirits. The first throne is in the north, and it is the throne of Luciphiel, first among all demons, and of his brother Alberith, along with their 9 winds of pestilence. The 2 present there being Satan, the wind of Lucifer, and Maimona, the wind of his brother. And 7 others are scattered to the 7 parts of the world, who are called the highest winds, namely Zeab, Abnalamar, and so on. And anyway, then it goes on to talk about the throne called Parmak, a Tartarian throne, blah, blah, etc.
And these thrones we see being passed through Heptameron into Ars Goetia as well, right?
We do.
Yeah. So they are described as winds, but these are separate from the 40 winds. This is more of a how would you describe how would you differentiate between these?
If we concern the topic of the 6 seats of demons, it's a very interesting topic, and I can't recall this being mentioned in other grimoires, but it features of them, like you said in Heptameron, Lucidarium, Goetia, and others. But what we know, Ganell again in the on this topic quotes Solomon, and he states that there are 6 seats of the spirits or thrones of the underworld. Their number is not coincidence. It represents a kind of 3D model, like 4 directions, and also above and below, that is heaven and earth. So these seats reflects the three-dimensionality of our universe. And Ganell describes them as a hierarchical structure, but I think it maybe reflects in reality more of the relationship between medieval princes and their vassals. These seats actually very important for different methods of conjurations, and calling them is like a command on behalf of this hierarchy of chief demons. The best known text in which this thrones mentions is Placatio Spiritum from Liber Juratus, and if you recall it, Genealogia Hide Ministri Tartarae, and so on. And this part was transmitted into Lucidarium, then into Heptameron, from in this form or another, it reproduced in different grimoires. So this is what we know about these thrones, but it's a part of cosmology of Ganellus, and probably of this magician master Solomon. Maybe other his students and the circle of magicians of that time.
And I think what's really fascinating for me specifically is that we see the 4 cardinal kings, Oriens, Ememon, Paimon, and Egin here as well. They're part of this overall structure, right?
Yes, in this structure, 3 principal demons like Lucifer, or Lucifer, as he calls him sometimes, Beelzebub and Satan, they are principal, not even kings, but principalities of underworld. And they have their own kings. Like Beelzebul has 7 aerial kings under him. We know from Heptameron, it's for 7 planets,
etc.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Arkan, Varkan, and others.
Sarabotas.
And 4 kings you mentioned are under Saturn. And also Saturn has another different 7 kings under him. So this is actually all these 6 seats are under these 3 principal demons. And others like Betela, Nathaniel, they looks like vessels of Beelzebul or Saturn. And actually, Beelzebul is in charge of the throne of Betela. He occupies it, but Betela is nominal king of this throne. And this is very interesting and maybe strange for us, connections between these kinds of demon hierarchy.
So it's more than just a hierarchy that we would normally find in a list of demons for conjuration. We're really talking about like a cosmological structure of the universe, right? That we're uttering these names and facing the correct directions in the correct hours so that we can gain access to the spirits of these thrones. And so we have 6, as you mentioned, there are 6 thrones, but we have 8 directions. Is there anything that you can add to that? Or there's this ongoing mystery that I really love passing out with authors and people we come across, but there's always this aspects of the north, or in our case specifically the northeast, where we see strange things happening, let's put it that way. So in this grand architecture of the cosmos, which is described here, what's happening in the northeast?
Oh, it's not about these 6 seats. It's about 7 directions of working with aerial spirits, not with underworld demons. Yes, this is different directions, because if we try to put all these 6 seats in the like in the east, north, and west, south parts of underworld, we find that seat of Lucifer is in middle between north and east. Seat of Satan is directly on the north, and seat of Beelzebul is between east and south, but not directly between them. And the last floriget is seats of Paimon and of 15 legions of demons. It is on the west, but close to the southern west. And 2 other seats of Baldach and Monomeria, they are not situated on the parts of these 4 cardinal directions, but it's in the middle. Probably it's Baldach is the seat of the above, and Monomeria the seat of the earth, or yes, under these directions. 3D model. Somewhere Ganellus told that the 6 seats are the major seats, and there are a lot of others, but he doesn't mention it.
So there's even more?
Yes,
Right.
extra seats.
Right. It's so complicated. There's so much complexity in this. So trying to wrap your head around the whole manner in which it's constructed is yeah, there's a lot going on.
I know only 6 seats from Ganellus, and he definitely states that they are not coincidental. 6 seats, 4 direction, and above and below.
In book 2, do you describe the other sets of the kings? Is it Labour, Nathaniel? Is that right? And there's another set of 4 kings, right?
They're all there.
They're all in it. Oh yeah,
including 4 that appear in Bruno's Magia.
Oh right, okay.
Yeah.
There's another 4. Right.
Yeah.
This is what I'm interested in. I want to know about this structure. This cosmological structure is really interesting to me. I'm learning about the 4 kings as well. This is gold. Absolute gold.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So something else that I'm really interested in regard to the grimoires now, I think this might not necessarily be in your book 1, but I'm confident that it's going to be in your version of book 2. We see many of the same spirit names presented within the Summa, which have their origins in what I believe to be, or could be, the book of the offices of spirits. So a book I suspect Cecco Diascoli decades earlier also had access to and was drawing from. But Cecco claims that the text that he's drawing from was authored by Hipparchus. He attributes a lot of his this esoteric knowledge to a pseudo Hipparchus, being the ancient Greek astronomer and mathematician. But it's either pseudo-epigraphical, or he's not so convincingly covering up the nigromantic materials that he's quoting from. Either way, we see in book 2 of the Summa that there are 2 catalogs presented, one after the other immediately. Many of the spirits listed here are familiar to us, especially if we've got access to the Book of the Offices of Spirits, or maybe Oberon, or even the Ars Goetia. What's unchanged, however, is the organization of the spirits under the 4 cardinal kings. So in your understanding, what is the origin and the importance of these cardinal rulers, and just how influential was this spirit catalogue on the rest of the grimoire tradition?
Actually, we don't know for certainly which part of the text Ganell is quoting from, but he mentions both Solomon and Tos Greekos. Formerly, I thought that only Tos Greekos was the author of Liber Officiorum, but Ganell quotes both of them. And sometimes when giving specific description of the spirits, he writes how influent, he writes that this is from Solomon, this is from Tos Greekos. And probably both of them had their own catalog of spirits, and Ganellus combined them in his own book. How influential are these lists of spirits from Ganell's book? I don't think we can say that Ganell's text influenced many grimoires, but most likely the Solomon and Tos Greekos probably did, because we have no their works now on our hands, but they were probably well known in ancient times, and many authors or other grimoires took this list from them. So what about cardinal kings? We know that they are under Satan, one of the principal demons of the underworld, and the list of spirits in the book too, divided by directions, whom are under Oriens, who are under Aegean and Amaimon and so on. So this is very interesting. For book 2, we'll see many descriptions which are not in other grimoires about spirits, like their relationship between each other. Someone is the son of another demon and so on.
Yes, that's something that's really interesting, right? That they're actually given genealogies. They have parents, right? These are I mean, we see this in a lot of like other earlier materials, and like descriptions, for instance, like we find of the jinn, right, where they're organized into family groups, right? So we see some kind of similarity there at play, right?
We do.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, because I bring that up because I think a lot of people who are interested in more modern grimoire magic assume that these are just spirit names that we just conjure, but there's just so much history behind them, and uncovering their lineages, their family trees, as it were, is something that just it casts so much more information upon who they are and where they're from, what their roles and functions are within our magic, right? But yeah, I'm really, really looking forward to that.
It is wonderful stuff. There's just the idea of demons having kids. Bethala is the son of Admede, or Admede is the son of Bethala, or Beelzebub. I've forgotten the details, but yeah, we've got demons who are the son of this one and the brother to that one, and yeah, it's a family affair.
It's wonderful. Yeah, it humanizes it in a way. It makes them more terrestrial and more approachable in a sense. But we have other materials where for instance, is it like in the Book of Enoch where there's lots of descriptions of spirits who beget other spirits and things, and so there's a precedence for this in history and tradition, but it's interesting to see it laid out so plainly in what we could call essentially like proto-grimoire or early grimoire materials. But yeah, so obviously you're both continuing the work of the remaining 4 books of the Summa Sacre Magice. But once this mammoth task has been accomplished, where do you think that you're going to set your focus on next? And what other areas of research do you think are important for people interested in this subject? And where should we start exploring next?
Alongside SSM, we've got a couple of other ideas we're working on. Firstly, there is a book about Rings of Solomon. And it is very interesting that the text about the describes very essential magical tools, like 4 rings of Solomon. But Ganell's instruction on how to consecrate them are rather difficult to follow, and sometimes it is, we don't understand what he is talking about. For example, about change your fingers during reading consecration prayers. But we have also different manuscripts on 4 rings. And we decided to translate this manuscript to give the understanding of how to work with these rings and how to consecrate them properly. So the second text is the Latin Almadel. Yes, this is the same Vex Almadel which everyone knows from the Lemegeton, but Lemegeton's Almadel appears with numerous distortions. It is incomplete. It has wrong names and so on. But so we have at least 2 good Latin manuscripts of one family, and we are currently working on them, translating the text. And the third text, it's about the construction of Heptameron and Elisodarium.
Oh, wow.
Very interesting, because some parts of it based on Summa.
Interesting. Yes, right. So you've got like direct lineage from between texts. That's fantastic. Guys,
Yes.
This is incredible. You guys truly doing the Lord's work here. I am very excited to get my hands on book 2, and the rest. Once you've got your way, you've worked your way through them. Your other projects also sound really fascinating. Bradley, do you have anything else that you're working on yourself?
Not relevant to magic, but I'm certainly looking forward to doing obviously working on the rest of SSM, get the whole thing done in a complete form, which means we will end up having to tackle the German manuscript somehow, because that's the only thing that fills in some of the missing parts from Cassel. But yeah, we've got some ideas about things to do after this.
Well, Solomonic rings and the Arbitel and all of that, it's all sounds absolutely amazing. I'm really looking forward to hearing more from you guys about that. Thank you both so much for coming on to the show today. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you.
Thank you so much for having us. It's been great being on here, and not as terrifying as I thought my first podcast would be.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
That was Bradley Sneddon and Andreas Erneus, authors of Summa Sacre Magice, the Summa of Sacred Magic, independently published and available now through any online retailer. The Summa has been on my mind for a very long time now, and as I'm sure it has been for many people listening who are interested in grimoire studies. So now that we have a selection of translations currently being published in English at this moment, is just so exciting. It's always been something that's been just on the horizon for so long now, given its vast scale and the difficulties of translation. But finally, we are living in a time where passionate people are working hard to collaborate and bring this wealth of knowledge from the very dawn of the grimoire tradition into the modern day. So I'm just so excited, so happy that this is happening right now, and I get to read this material. It's amazing. In today's episode, we made several mentions of the fantastic essay by Damaris Asca-Gia, found in the highly recommended Routledge History of Medieval Magic. And you can find 2 links to that document in the description below. So please follow those if you are interested in the book itself, which I recommend you get your hands on, and the essay, which I think you can find as a full PDF on the academic.edu website. I really enjoyed talking to Bradley and Andy today, especially about Ganell's perspective of his magic as a form of practical theology. I'm also fascinated by just the staggering amount of voces magicae which are presented within this work. And, you know, we can compare this to other forms of magic from far earlier, like the Greek magical papyri. But what we're presented with here is this incredibly baroque system of astrological magic, which it doesn't necessitate that the operator have much of an understanding of astrology itself or casting elections. I mean, maybe that was silently understood, or it was silently expected that the operator of this magic would have a fluency in the subject of astrology. However, what we're presented with is a system whereby the magician can conjure these various permutations of planets and signs and seasons, names of the sun and the moon and the earth, all together to capture the virtues of the moment in which the magic is being performed. And so we see an alternative methodology at play, one where the sorcerer isn't bound by what aspects are playing out in the stars on any one night, but instead by the names of the spirits that reside in the moment. And I think that is just so powerful. It's such an interesting perspective and way of approaching astrological magic that I think we just need to spend so much more time working with and learning from. So now that the books of the Summa are being translated, we're getting this this new methodology, this new way of approaching astrological magic, which is just, for me, just an absolute dream. I'm so excited by it. I really enjoyed the way that Bradley put it. He said that it's not just that we have the phone book, but we have the work roster as well. And if we need to get in touch with a geezer, you know exactly who's on, and you can address them by name when they pick up the phone, which is just a fantastic analogy. I remain amazed by how the Kessel manuscript was only discovered in the 1960s by Christella and ended up languishing for decades because nobody really understood what it exactly was. And so, you know, it's just sat there for so long. However, saying that, you know, despite this languishing for so long, for so many centuries, and then since its discovery for decades since then, the manuscript itself has had this direct influence on the history of magic through the angelic sorcery of Dr. Dee and Edward Kelly, and in turn it highly influenced the work of Aleister Crowley, as recorded in his Vision and the Voice, and most importantly in his reception of Liber Alvel Legis, the Book of the Law. And the mysteries of this, the revelations of that, which went on to be transmitted into the post-Thelemic stellar sorceries of the EQ, and then later into Jake Stratton Kent's expression of Goetia through the Grimorium Verum. Ganell's invisible hand has been at play through the centuries, and now we live in a time where we can read his work in English for the very first time. And what transformations will this bring to our practice in the decades and the centuries to come? Very exciting time. Personally, there remains some wonderful ambiguity in the description of the winds and the cosmological structures which are expressed by them. And Ganell describes these two types of winds, natural and unnatural, the latter having the power to control demons. And so while Ganell goes on to describe these spirits as unique from demons within the infernal hierarchy, we're still left with questions. But most importantly, with a new perspective, a glimpse into obscure areas of medieval thought which still remain tantalizingly beyond reach. I'm very much looking forward to Bradley and Andy's work on the remaining 4 books of the Summa. A link to their self-published translation of Book 1 has been included in the description below. So if you're interested in this subject, then I highly recommend you go and check it out. If you have listened this far, then thank you so much for your continued support for Hadean Press and our global authorship. If you have any suggestions for authors that you would like to see on the podcast in the future, then please leave a message below. As always, please like, share, and subscribe for more just like this in the future. Last month, we reached an important milestone of 2,000 subscribers to the channel, which is excellent. Fantastic stuff, guys. Let's try and double that number by next year. We have some great guests booked for the coming months. Looking forward very much to sharing even more awesome books, research, and magic with you all. Thank you again for listening. I have been your host, Matt Hadfield, and I will see you all again in the next one.